Hey everyone, welcome to part 4 of my ZZ tutorial. In this part, I will show you guys how to make EO lines. Please keep in mind that the EO line is a very flexible and abstract thing, and because of that, there aren't any set formulas or algorithms to solve it. It's more of a case-by-case basis, and what you do is you use a set of concepts and ideas that you first practice beforehand, and you get them into your head and you kind of pick and choose the concepts you want to bring out when you solve the EO line. So in this video, I'm just going to show you guys a bunch of concepts and ideas, tips and suggestions for you to take with you while solving the EO line. Before I go and do that, let me talk about some just basic EO line stuff. This is the EO line, and it's a line, so this is what you want to get after you orient the edges. All right, a lot of people begin EO line just by orienting the edges and finding the line edges, which are these two edges. I will refer to them as the line edges because these are the edges that belong in the line. And what they'll do is, as I said earlier, orient the edges and then find the two line edges and solve them, but that's not exactly the most efficient way to do it because that becomes a two-step process. So as you practice EO line and use the tips and tricks I'm about to give you, try to incorporate the line solving as part of your edge orientation, and there will be a lot of interesting things you can do to influence these two line edges aside from just, blindly solving the edge orientation and then looking. For starters, the EO line can be solved in an average of slightly more than 6 moves. However, when I played with an optimal EO line solver, which I will link to you guys in the description, I found that a lot of the EO lines were very, very abstract, and some of them I just didn't even understand like the first move. Of course, after I went over it a couple times, it kind of made sense to me. But at the same time, some of them are very, very abstract, and I think it's borderline unrealistic to solve EO line optimally every single time. What I recommend is getting close as possible, but at the same time, trying to make your EO line finger trick friendly, and also at the same time not ruin your visibility so much. And when I say ruin your visibility so much, I mean if you are making a bunch of turns that affect the U layer and the E layer, it's not very easy to see where you're going after you make the EO line. So I'd much rather end my EO line execution with a D or something as opposed to an F or an F2 because that jumbles up my F2L portion quite a bit, so I can't really see into my solve. So those are already some considerations you'll take. I'll restate them as tips and tricks formally later in this video. Let's start with number 1. Alrighty, so the first rule is be selective with your F and B quarter turns. This is a very, very simple example, but it shows you guys how to be selective, and it really brings that idea to the physical to show you exactly what I mean. You can apply this to more complicated cases, but first let's work through this example. So every single edge on this cube is oriented except for the front 4. So this one's wrong, this one's wrong, this one's wrong, and this one's wrong. And I'm holding it like this. And I notice that if I do an F, it would orient all my edges, and it would also solve the EO line. But from this position, it would also orient the EO if I do an F prime. However, one is definitely better than the other. From this position, doing F is superior to doing F prime. So that's what I mean by be selective with your front and back quarter turns. Obviously, this one's a bit of a no-brainer, and you can just see right up front that it's going to solve the EO line. But in the middle of a solve, sometimes it will really make a difference whether you do a B or a B prime or an F prime. So just keep that in your head while you solve the EO line. It's not always F and not always B. You can definitely do F prime or B prime. So try not to have a very, very strong bias for anything really, and just try to treat them all equally and use them as tools to maximize your EO line efficiency. All right, so number two is comfort is key. And what I mean is you should definitely consider your own physical comfort when you solve the EO line. It's not all about who gets the shortest move count EO line, because some very short EO lines are very, very annoying to execute. And as you can imagine, even worse to do one-handed. So definitely you want to consider comfort. Personally, I can't speak for everyone, but personally, I like comfortable EO lines compared to slightly shorter but really, really annoying to execute EO lines. To give you guys some actual numbers, most of the time I would prefer over, say, a 6-move optimal EO line that's really ugly to execute. I would much rather prefer a 7-mover or even an 8-mover that is very straightforward and really helps get me thinking through the F2L while I do it. So, it's all about trying to make yourself as comfortable as possible, because I know when you orient the edges, I'm going to have to do F and B and F prime and B prime, and some of those moves are uncomfortable, which is why we're trying to avoid them in the F2L anyway. So yeah, just try to use your best judgment and don't always follow a low move count and be attracted to it. There are a lot of other considerations to make, and comfort is by far one of the top considerations. Number three is consider rotations. And I know that sounds kind of weird from a guy that uses a method that avoids rotations, but seriously, consider rotations. And what I mean by that is it's kind of linked to the comfort issue. I know that my solving orientation is blue front and yellow top, and I know that if I have any wrong edges, I'm going to have to make an F or a B quarter turn to orient them. But if I have such a case where I need to make an F or a B turn and oftentimes next to each other, I will consider rotating here, say for example. What happens if I rotate here is my F and B become R and L, and that is much better than doing F or B from my solving orientation, even though I will be actually solving from this orientation. So the general idea is don't completely abandon rotations because the F2L tries to avoid them. They're actually a very good tool to use. You can rotate this way and have it become R and L also. So you have a wide variety of angles you can execute the EO line. Sometimes I'll even do it from here and have it function as U and D. So just be as flexible as possible with the angles you can execute the EO line. Do not dismiss anything rotation wise as being a bad angle, because oftentimes it will help you if you make the right choice. Of course, it will help you you know through all the ugliness of the F turns and the B turns in the F2L. Obviously, there are some angles that are completely impractical, like say most of the time solving the EO line on top isn't too great, but just try to be smart with the angle you select for execution. I call this, or other people have referred to this as angle of execution, but that's literally what it is. You pick your best angle of execution. Okay, so the tip is be aware of the stuff that could happen. And this is really important because it will really help you decide how to be selective with F and F prime and how to prioritize comfort. Because when I say the stuff that could happen, I mean be aware of where your two line edges will end up after you do the EO. So I'll be highlighting a bunch of cases for you just to show you guys what could really, really happen in a solve, and we'll go from there. So this is an EO line. It's just solved. I just randomly scrambled the cube and randomly made an EO line, so it's there for us. The first thing that could happen when you solve the EO is that the line is simply solved, and this is really nice, and you've just saved a bunch of time. Sometimes, or most of the time, it's not like all like this. Sometimes you can get it like this. And I call this group, this category, some form of D move away. And rightly so, the EO line is some form of D move away. Right now it's a D prime away like this, but it could very well be a D2 away or a D move away. So this is really, really nice. It's not too many moves away, but sometimes you could get this, so be prepared to run into something like this. Personally, I would always like for my EO line to be solved after I orient the edges. Most of the time it's not a reality, so what I hope to do is place my line edges opposite so that I could take one move to adjust it back. Sometimes what you can get is the line edges are opposite, but they are not on the D layer. So this is one example. There's one over here, and there's one over here. So example EO line would be L R2D. So you will have to do something like that. So be prepared to also, if you can't solve the EO line with the EO and you can't place a line edge, both line edges on the D face, at least try to get them opposite so that you have a very easy, finger-friendly kind of like this insertion. Now, the rest of the cases I'm going to describe are not so friendly, and they are all adjacent cases. So I'm going to set up an adjacent case. So this would be an adjacent case, and this is not cool because it takes 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to solve it, and in the process, it really disturbs the F2L, so it inhibits look ahead. You do not want to run into this when you solve the EO line, so I would avoid it at all costs. If it does happen and it's a bit out of your control, what I would do is simply solve the cross piece here, and that will kick out the other edge, and then you can replace your line edge in the correct spot and get a cross piece with it. So this is not the best thing to do here, but you could just put this cross piece in with a UR2, and it'll free this piece up, and then you can insert it in the back. One case where the cross piece insertion isn't so bad is if it's like this and the cross piece is here. What you can simply do is R prime, and now your other edge is here. You can do a D prime and R. Now they're opposite of each other, and another D, and it'll solve this cross piece for you. So that's the really ugly one. You do not want to have them adjacent. Sometimes they're adjacent, and there's one piece on the down layer and there's one piece that's not. This isn't as bad. It's 1, 2, 3 like that. So what I would do is move this one out of the way over here, move this one down so that they're opposite, and I would correct it again. And sometimes they are adjacent, but nothing is on the D layer. This one's also very, very tricky. What I would do here is I could U2, which would make them opposite, and then I would do a very classic opposite insertion. Or I could send one to the bottom and do a D2, and it would make it adjacent. Another form of opposite is like this. And this is also really, really tricky, even though it's just an F2 and a B2. It really, really disturbs the F2L. So this one's also something you want to avoid. This is really, really tough to look at because all the pieces that I'm going to be seeing after I make the F2 and the B2 are currently on the down layer and I can't really see them. So this is another case to avoid. So there are some cases that are good and you would prefer them, and there are some cases that you should definitely avoid. I would avoid all the adjacent cases unless you just don't have any other options. And I would also avoid this. This is not cool at all, and it really hurts your look ahead. If I were to really do this, I wouldn't even do F2, B2. I would maybe do some form of U move and treat it as an opposite like this. But again, that's more moves, a lot of double turns, and double turns aren't good because it sends pieces from the bottom to the top, and it's really hard to see. So I hope you found that useful. There are definitely ways to manipulate the line edges afterwards to suit your preferences. So don't just randomly do it, because oftentimes there is one way that gives you a much more comfortable position than another. Okay, so the last and a very important general tip is to consider your look ahead into the F2L. So basically, think about your future and not focus solely on just getting that EO line, because sometimes it can get really awkward transitioning. And what makes it awkward is if you use very, very large movements to solve the EO line. Let's say you have this, right? And I know I've said this already, but I'll just reiterate it because it's so important. What you don't want to do is do all your EO and set something up like this. Unless you have something really, really obvious planned in your head, this will really mess with your look ahead, because you'll end up doing L2, R2D, and most of the pieces that were in the bottom layer have been moved up to the top, and the pieces are just moving everywhere, and you can't really see anything when you solve. So what I would much rather prefer is, say, um, try to keep as many pieces intact as possible while adjusting or solving the line. So this one is not too bad. Say I have one edge here, my blue edge, and my green edge is opposite of it. So the solution would be R prime D, right? So considering R prime D, I know that these pieces don't really move. So I can really keep an eye on these pieces and just try to figure out where they are, and then I don't have to really think about where they are after I just look at them once, because I know that they're staying in place. So I can really concentrate on tracking the movement of the other pieces while I do it. Obviously, this one's even better because I can see the entire U-face and the entire belt over here, and I don't really have to track my pieces. And I see this pair right here. This is probably not the best thing to do, but it's very visible, and I can really see what's going on here. So just try to maximize your visibility when you adjust your EO line. So stuff like this, this is really horrible. I said this earlier, because all the pieces will just turn up over here, and it's really hard to track everything. So please be mindful of your transition into the F2L when you do the EO line. The EO line is something that you want to get done, but it's not the end of the solve, so you have to prepare for what comes afterwards. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the general tips. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work over all the example solves of EO that I did in my previous video when I showed you guys the example solves with the variety of numbers of edges wrong. Except this time I'm actually going to do the EO and the line, and I will explain to you guys what goes on in my head when I solve these EO lines. Before I start doing this, please keep in mind that I am not a machine, and therefore will not, spot everything in 15 seconds. So there are some EO lines that might be slightly longer than optimal. If they are, I will make sure that they are comfortable and easy to execute. If you have any questions about any of these solutions, just feel free to comment, and we'll talk about it. So let's get started with the first example. Okay, so this scramble has no misoriented edges. It's the same one as the first scramble I did in the previous video, where there were no misoriented edges. This piece, which is the blue line edge, is over here, and the green line edge is over here. So I know that this is an opposite case, and I will need an R prime, an L2, and a D prime to solve the line. But I'm just not going to jump into it when I first start, because this would probably take 1 or 2 seconds to realize when I do inspection. So I'm going to look a little bit deeper and talk about the look ahead into F2L, as I mentioned as one of the tips. I think this is a really nice example. So I know that this side will have to have some sort of L2 move, right? And this side I will do an R prime. So if you're comparing the size of the movement over here is smaller. It's less. I'm moving less. So I know that the pieces around this area will be affected less, and the pieces around this area will be affected more. In terms of what's not going to be affected, this piece is not going to be affected, and this piece is not going to be affected. So I'm really going to think about which block to solve first, and I will weigh my options right now. So if I look at this piece back here, it's red and red and green belongs on the right side because it's back here, and blue is the front. So I kind of look for the red cross edge to see where it is, and it's over here. And that's not good news for me because when I do the L2, the red cross edge will be on the left side and it will be trapped and not in a good position to complete with this. So I'm actually going to do this one. So I'm going to look for its corresponding edge piece, and it's over here. This one will stay over here when I do the L2, so it's in a relatively good position. And then its corresponding corner, which is back here, and this is also a good position because I will be moving it up once this cross piece gets placed down with the R prime. So right off the bat, I know where my three pieces are after I do the EO line, so it's actually not going to be hard at all to see. I'm going to involve this piece, and this piece. So once I execute the EO line with R prime L2 D prime, the piece is here now, and this piece is here, and this piece is here, and it becomes much easier to find a solution for this. Alright, so this is the scramble with two wrong edges, and I have two different ways to do it. I'll show you both. The first one is over here in terms of the wrong edge. The first wrong edge is here, and the other one is over here. So from my point of view, they're like this. So the first one involves doing an F to make this one over here right, and these three will be wrong as a result. And afterwards, I'll link this one in with the other ones, and then I'll make some other sort of F turn, and then I'll correct my line edges. So I know that if I were to just make an F R2 F, say for example, the last move could be either F or F prime, my line edges would stay in place. This one would be here, and this one would be here, and it will be really, really awkward. But I can actually do that because I have this piece over here, and when I do an R2, it will send this piece down here, and it will be correctly solved relative to this piece, which will give me 3/4 of a cross when I solve it. So I'm not going to worry too much about having a slightly more awkward line because I know that one of the cross pieces will be solved, and then I know to look for one of the left pairs because I know that the cross piece is solved, and I'll most likely be interested in one of the pairs. So let's try that now. I'm going to do an F, an R2, and then an F. And as you saw, this piece is now down here, and it's connected to this piece, and they're correctly solved relative to each other. So now I'm going to do a D prime, which will send this piece over here, opposite to this piece, and then an L2 D prime. And it really was solved, and I have a connected pair option over here I can do, which is really visible, and I also have a connected pair option over here. This is orange-blue, and this is orange-blue. So solving this cross piece really helped me gain look ahead in my transition from my EO line to the F2L. Just keep in mind that you shouldn't be overly greedy about solving the cross pieces. It's never a good idea to finish the EO line and then find the two cross pieces and then solve them right after the EO line. Usually it's a waste of time because you're taking many more looks at the cube than you really should. This one just happened to be part of the inspection, which wasn't too bad, and I justified this by saying it really, really helps me with look ahead. For example, what I could do is solve this pair and know that it doesn't mess with this piece, and then all I need to do while solving this pair is tracking this piece, and that's very easy work. So this is, I think, well justified because it really helps me form the left block as soon as I finish the 3/4 cross. Alright, so let's take a look at the alternate solution. This is the same scramble, and to remind you again, the wrong edge is here, and the other wrong edge is back here. And I'm going to actually change my angle of execution from this position, my solving orientation, to this position. And what I hope to accomplish here is building this pair like this, or it's like somewhat of a block here, and retaining it while I solve the F2L. The solution goes kind of like this. So I'm going to rotate here, and if I do this, then these three will be wrong, right? And I will put this one in here. Now it's grouped with everything else that's wrong, and then I will put it back here, and afterwards I will put this opposite, rotate back, and do a D2, and that will allow this piece to be preserved, and I know its corresponding pieces over here, so it gives me also a way to look into the F2L while doing the EO line. So these are two ways to do it. Personally, I like this way, the first one a little bit better, but both of them work. It really depends on your preference. So this is the scramble with 4 wrong edges, and I'll point them out to you again just to remind you. These two are wrong right here, and these two are wrong over here. And on this cube, what I'm going to do is show you a not so clever way to do it. It'll be correct because the EO line will be solved, but it will not be very efficient. And if I were to do this actual method to solve the EO line in this case, I would be really angry with myself in an actual solve because I would have no look ahead into the F2L and my EO line would be very long. But I'm just going to show you the bad way and then compare it to the good way I'm going to do on this cube over here. So let's start with the not so good way. I know that these two pieces can be moved over here, so I can do a U and an R prime. And then this piece can be moved over here. So this piece that's wrong can be moved over here to group with the other three. So I just do that. And now I have all four, but I'm stuck. Because if I did an F, these two would be adjacent and it would be horribly inconvenient. And if I did an F prime, I would still need to do, say, a U L2D to solve the EO line. So that's already way too many moves and too much thinking. And I really don't know anything after this, like what's going on, right? So I would not prefer doing it this way. Although it'll get the job done, it won't get the job done well. So let's try this one here. This is the same, the two wrong over here and two wrong over here. So my way of thinking for this one is I can somehow get this over here using a D move, and it will shoot this one over here. And then my goal will become, how can I get this blue piece somewhere on this side so that they will be opposite? Because remember, opposite is better than adjacent when it comes to positioning of the EO line edges. So then I have an idea because I see that this piece is like this. What if I move this one over here to the front, right? Because if I did, then I can do an F prime to transport it to the left side, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So first I'm going to do an R prime, and then I'm going to do a D, and now I have three wrong edges on the front, and I've collected this one over here, and I'm going to do a U2, which will bring this piece over here, and now you can see if I do an F prime like this, they're opposite, and then I can insert it like that. And that is a much better way to do this EO line, and it's much more comfortable because it ends with a D move and doesn't affect anything over here, so I can really look at what I'm getting over here. Alright, so this is a scramble with 6 wrong edges, and as you can see I have 2 cubes. This one I'm going to do to kind of show you guys something not to do, and then for this one I'm going to solve it the way I think is best. So let's do the wrong one first. So the lesson here, to put it in the simplest terms, don't always follow what just looks initially attractive. Sometimes there is a really nasty after effect that will happen, and it's not good to be in that situation once you get there. So first I'll show you where the wrong edges are, and then I'll purposely go after something that just looked enticing from the beginning. So I have 3 wrong edges over here, so 1, 2, 3, and then I have 4, 5, and 6. So I have 6 wrong edges, and as you know, 3 into 1 into 3 is a very nice way to solve 6 wrong edges. So And also, as you might know, 3 into 1 into 3 begins with having 3 wrong in one face, doing a quarter turn on that face, and forcing the one that was originally right into a wrong position, and then you can group that 1 with the other 3, hence the name 3 into 1 into 3. So, as you can see, there are 3 wrong in the front here, and this is what I mean by enticing, because this is enticing. There are 3 already wrong, so, you know, at first glance, why can't I do an F prime, right? Because it solves this edge, and it makes this one wrong, and I can group it with this one, and that one to make 4 by doing U prime, L prime, R, B prime, right? And then, once the edges are oriented, this one I can place over here doing this, and then I can do a B2 and it will solve the EO line. And though it gets the job done, it's not exactly the best plan because B2 is a really awkward way to end an EO line. And from here, I really don't know where I'm going because I'm not actually looking at enough F2L pieces. So it's much better to end the EO line like this so that you can see a bunch of your stuff. So definitely this EO line worked, but it wasn't the best. And one thing kind of led to another when I went forward with using the 3 in the front that were wrong. And that's definitely had a consequence that didn't play out really well for me. Now let's talk about this scramble. It's really the same thing. Let's move this back a little bit. All right, so this is the same thing. And I have 3 wrong in the front, 2 wrong here, and 1 wrong in the back. So instead of acting on the 3 in the front, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece right here and do an L2. Now it's in the back, and I've formed 3 wrong in the back, right? And then what I'm going to do is a B turn, solving this blue edge piece, which is also a line edge, against the green center. So as you might have guessed, my next goal is to orient the rest of the edges and solve the green edge piece next to the blue center. And that's perfectly possible for me because it's right here, and the other wrong edge is here, and here, and here. So all I need to do from this position is a U, L, R prime, F prime. And you can see I've solved the green edge with the blue center, and this is still intact, so all I need to do is a D2. And while I do the D2, I have the entire upper layers to look at. So, and nothing is moving, so I can really see what I'm doing when I do the D2. So, in my opinion, this is a much better way to do the EO line. I think it's fewer moves, and it also has better look ahead. So, long story short, I really recommend thinking about the consequences, especially the long-term consequences of the moves you make when you have such flexibility like in 6 edges wrong, because you can do a lot of things like 4 plus 2, 3 into 1 into 3, you know, so, and there are many ways to do each of these solutions. So really think about the long-term effects of what you're doing and don't be very tunnel visioned and just see something attractive and just diving immediately in, because most of the time you will be very disappointed by what happens. So just be always on the lookout for hidden solutions. Alright, so this is the scramble with 8 wrong edges. I've got 4 wrong in the back, all 4 wrong, and 3 in the front, and 1 to the side down here. So when we have 8, we typically do it 4 and 4 because it's so straightforward. Generally, I don't consider any other options unless 4 and 4 is just completely out of the question, and I've never felt that way before, so I always do 4 and 4. So in this example, I'm going to show you guys 2 things. Number 1 is just a repeat of what I just previously said, but it's very, very important that you just don't go after the first thing that you see. You know, the first very inviting thing, maybe it's, you know, all 4 edges in one face and you can just quarter turn to solve them, kind of like that. And that's actually what happens here. I have all 4 here, and I'm going to greedily go after it, and we'll see how things go. The second point, which is slightly more positive, is that you can actually build or prepare your EO line while you're doing the EO. So you can kind of blend the steps together. Everything doesn't have to be, you know, do this, do that, and then afterwards do that. It's a very flexible thing, as I said previously, so just keep in mind that you can prepare your EO line significantly while you're solving EO, and this example will really show you that. So on this first cube in my hand right now, I'm just going to do it the very direct way. I'm going to act on whatever I see first, and I'll show you how one thing leads to another. So obviously, if I 4 here, I want to do some form of B move, and I see, okay, well, if I do a B prime, it's going to solve it. You know, way to go. So I just B prime, and now my edge is nicely solved. However, when I look back here, I have 3 wrong here and 1 down here, and there's no way I can avoid, without many moves, doing a D and an R. This is the shortest way to kind of collect all of them on one face, and I know from here I can't do an F because it would lock these two in adjacent, and that's a horrible thing to have. So instead I'm going to do an F prime because it's my only choice, and then from here I have to swing this around and then put it down and put it back like this, and I've already wasted many moves doing this. So what I'm going to show you here is the other scramble, which is the same as the first one. Still got the 4 wrong here and the 3 wrong in the front and 1 down here, but instead of doing a B prime and locking myself in that really gross pattern of wasting moves, I'm going to do a B. So now this edge is over here, and when I do that D and R, I know that if I do an F, this move, this piece right here, after this move, will be opposite, and then I can do a B2, and this whole thing is solved. And that was only 5 moves. Normally, I don't like B2 at the end of an EO line because it puts me at a very awkward angle, but it's a price that I'm normally willing to pay for a 5-move EO line because that's a pretty good EO line. So just keep in mind that the rules could be bent. Well, not really rules in the first place, but the guidelines could be bent to your favor if you do it well. And just make sure that you don't again go after something that just looks totally inviting, because it could really mess with you in the end when one thing leads to another and you're led to a really awkward state. So just keep that in mind, and also understand that you could prepare your EO line while you do EO. It's not like an A going to B process where you have to get this done before going to the next. Alright, so this is a scramble with 10 wrong edges, and that's a lot of wrong edges. So instead of telling you where they're wrong, I'm going to tell you where they're right. Just assume everything else is wrong. So this one is clearly right, and this one is also clearly right. So everything else is wrong. So in our case right here, I only have 1 cube this time. I'm going to show you some really interesting finger tricks that you could do for a lot of edges wrong. You can simultaneously turn F like this and B prime like this. So I'm going to do that in this example. So what I'm going to do is actually I know that once I do an R move, everything in the back will be wrong. And so after I do that R move, I'm going to do this like that, and I have these 2 pieces here, and I know that this piece I'm just going to keep on this face, because once I do an F prime, it's going to be here. So my goal is to get this piece over here, and I could do that because I have to load this piece, and this piece onto the front face. So I'm going to load them in a very particular order, I guess. So I'm going to put this one down here, and this one like this. And because I loaded it in such an order, this one's already over here. And when I do an F prime, it's opposite now, and then I do a D2 to solve the EO line. So you can actually make some very interesting finger tricks if you have a lot of edges and have to turn F and B simultaneously. You can just do this, and it's a really neat trick. Okay, so this is the scramble with all 12 edges wrong. And it's not cool if you get this in a competition because you really have to think when everything is wrong. So just for the sake of example, I am going to make a U move just to show you how powerful these two pieces are when they're in this type of position. When they're on the same face like this is the green edge, it's misoriented still, and this is the blue edge, and it's still misoriented. Remember, I just did a U move. So it was originally like this, and I just did this just to show you guys. The reason why this is so powerful is because of this. And if once you do this, this piece becomes one move solvable, and this piece becomes solvable with one move. So it's a really good position to be. I just reset everything I did. Please keep in mind when you're doing ones with 12 edges, you want to consider getting your edges in that position. So what I'm going to do here is really pursue that position. So I'm going to do an F like this. And the reason I do F instead of F prime is because I just like the feeling of having these two um, pieces in one move solvable position. And after that, I am going to do a U, and instead of an R prime, which would make solving the rest of the edges really annoying, I will do an R. So now I have a piece down here to fit in the back like this. So what I'm going to do is a D, and now everything is wrong here. So I'm going to do a B prime, and I have this one. You can go up here, and then an F, and then I'm a D2 away. And as I finish this EO line, my red edge is on the right side and my orange edge is on the left side, and I am in a very good position despite having an 8-move EO line. It was kind of tricky, but left me in good shape. And the EO line, or a large part of the EO line, is actually an adaptation of the algorithm I showed you in the last video. So what I'll do is I'll have the original algorithm here, and under it I will have the adaptation. It's only different by one move, and it really helped me in this scenario. Alright, so let's end with some closing thoughts. The first thing I want to say is I'm really sorry that I did not have a more structured way to teach EO line. It's a really hard thing to do because there are so many things that could happen, and it's kind of abstract at some time because you're not actually solving something until the very end. So for those of you that were expecting, a hard and fast, for here you do this and for there you do that, I'm sorry I didn't have that because I don't think it really exists. And when I look at the EO line and the learning process involved, I really think anybody can do the EO line eventually if they understand the concept of EO, because it's just a line, and most people who cube can most definitely form the line. So when you practice, I think it's best to keep in mind that just about anyone can solve an EO line, and it's not enough if you want to be fast. If you want to be fast, you have to solve the EO line well. So don't settle for high move count, really uncomfortable moves, and all the other things I warned you about, with the most important thing being don't go after the initial attractive, setup edges until you check it. Sometimes you'll check it and it will turn out great and you'll have a nice solve, but sometimes you'll check it and you'll realize, whoa, like this is going downhill once I make the first move. And I did go downhill in some of the EO line examples, so you can just see for yourself how awkward it could get compared to more elegant solutions. So just don't rush, and just keep in mind that when you're at home practicing, especially when you're learning at first, do not time yourself in the inspection. Really think things through. The concepts that I listed should act as tools. So, just bring your toolbox with you, and when you see something you want to, say, fix, in our case, the edges, you have a whole bunch of things you can use to fix the edges. Know which tool does what, and in what order you should use them in, how to combine them, and you will be perfectly fine when you solve the EO line. Solving the EO line and planning it faster is just a matter of doing the right thing over and over again and getting used to using the concepts. So the final closing thing I want to say is really keep in mind that it is not a matter of being able to do it, because just about anyone could do it. It is really important to do it well, and not many people can do it well. So if you want to be fast, do it well. That's the main idea of really anything in cubing. Once you know what it is, you could do it, but if you want to be fast, do it well. All right, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment and we'll talk. If you have your own suggestions on how to make EOLine a better experience for everyone, just post your suggestions as a comment, and if it's general enough, I will include it in the description so that everyone can have an easier time viewing it. The next video I will have is based on F2L. So if you want to look at what happens after the EOLine, check that out. So thank you again for watching. Hope to see you on my F2L video.